what I think is you'll likely have another move by Bitcoin to the upside. If Bitcoin is at 130K, if it's at 130K or 140K, and it's December, that's probably it, right? If it's at 180K, that's probably it. I think next year you will see a drawdown in the price of Bitcoin.
Cowen emphasizes it's more about when than where. He points out that Bitcoin today trades near levels not far from where it was months ago. Yet plenty of predictions made during that span were off by wide margins. This underscores how market context and timing carry more weight than static price calls. He suggests that by December, if Bitcoin is in the 130 to 140K range, or even higher, that could already be the tip of the cycle.
Please take a little time to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. You can also check out our other videos on cryptocurrencies and the overall digital asset space and drop your comments and observations in the comments section below. Everything you do helps with the YouTube algorithm and immensely contributes to the channel's growth. Thanks and enjoy the video.
I think my guess is that it does not go above 200. I think that diminishing returns is very much a thing. 124 is kind of an interesting number because, which is where Bitcoin already went. The main reason and I don't know why I even noticed these things, but I just remember in 2013, Bitcoin topped out at 1.24K, or so. It was right around 1.24K. I believe that high. Yeah, basically right around that level. But what's really interesting is in August of 2020, Bitcoin found a local top at 12.4K, right? And then, August 2025, 124K. So you could argue that the reason why it was the cycle top in 2013 was because it happened in Q4. In 2020, it did not happen in the fourth quarter. We had it, and it was also not even the post-halving year. So what I think is you'll likely have another move by Bitcoin to the upside. And I could see it topping anywhere from that 124, and it could go as high. It could go as high as close to 200. But I think it would be prudent to be aware that when you sort of measure these things from the lows, you would expect diminishing returns, right? You would expect diminishing returns. So I think the way I'm going to play this, David, is not to get married to any single price, because I feel like that is a great way to get wrecked when you sort of say all right, it's got to go this price. Because what essentially happens is if it doesn't make it there, everyone hates you, and if it does make it there, and then you say that's your top, and then it goes beyond it, everyone also hates you. So there's not really a great way to play. I think the best thing to do right now is just know which way the wind is blowing, right? And so I would say within a month, we need to at least start thinking about market cycle tops, whatever that price is. And the last thing I'll say is that, if Bitcoin is at 130K, if it's at 130K or 140K, and it's December, that's probably it, right? If it's at 180K, that's probably it. The point is it's more of a time thing. Bitcoin has the opportunity to go up. The other thing too, David, I think people should think about, especially the people that really like giving out price predictions, is when Trump took office, the price of Bitcoin was 109K, right? It was only $3,000 lower than the current price, right? So imagine how many price predictions people could have given you 9 months ago that would be completely wrong right now, right? Because Bitcoin is essentially at the same price that it was 9 months ago. So I think it's more so a timing thing. It's more so it doesn't really matter exactly where it is. It's just by the end of the year, that's generally the time that you want to start thinking about Bitcoin heading back the other direction. And there's two things I think you can look for confluence on a cycle top being in. One of those is just a weekly close below the 50-week moving average. A couple of those, they've always signaled the end of the bull market whenever you get weekly closes below the 50-week moving average. That's normally when Bitcoin then, goes into it didn't even go below the 50-week there on weekly closes, it did here. That historically ends the bull market. Right now, that 50-week moving average is at around 99K. So by next week, it'll be at 100K. So any weekly closes from here on out below 100K probably mean the cycle's over whenever that happens. And then the other thing to look at is the 2-year yield. I think the 2-year yield will also signify when things are over. And I mean, if I just pull it up very briefly, just for completeness, if you look at the 2-year yield, basically what you'll see is this support level at 3.5%. So I think you argue that as long as the 2-year yield is bouncing off this level, the bull market continues. But whenever the 2-year yield goes below 3.5%, it likely means that the market is starting to price in more risk towards the labor market and less risk towards a resurgence of inflation. So the good news is that the 2-year yield is bouncing just like it did last year when the Fed cut rates. But because they're not cutting as much this year, the bounce will likely not be as large. So you might just see something like this where the 2-year yield bounces back up a little bit just to get in that final rally, for Bitcoin and whatever the S&P is going to do, and then probably see a drop down here as we get out into 2026, and that could put a nice bow on the 4-year cycle for Bitcoin. Well, I mean, it just means the bear markets are a little bit more bearable, I guess, right? I mean, one of the nice things about diminishing returns is that you also have diminishing losses, right? The bear markets aren't as bad each cycle. If you just look here, I mean, you look at the price drawdowns for Bitcoin each cycle. The first one was about 94%. The next one was about 87. The next one was 84. And then the next one was 77. So, they've all, I mean, no one wants a 70% drop, right? But I mean, they've gotten a little bit more bearable, if you will. So, I mean, if the pattern continues, then in 2026, or from whatever the all-time high is, right? If the all-time high is 150K, or if it's 170K or 130K, whatever the all-time high is, probably you just look at whatever a 70% drawdown from that point would be. I think a 70% drawdown would be, that would make the most amount of sense. It would be in line with diminishing losses, but it would also allow for, some of the froth in the space to get sort of purged if Bitcoin were to see that type of drawdown. So, yeah, I mean, I think next year you will see a drawdown in the price of Bitcoin. I don't know the reason. I mean, I don't know what reason is going to be prescribed for it exactly. But yeah, I mean, I think a 70% drop from whatever the all-time high is seems about right. And the other thing, too, is to remember that every cycle in the midterm year, normally Bitcoin goes back to that 200-week moving average. And last cycle, it actually went below it. Also, David, there's one other thing that, I think this is a fascinating pattern, is that, and it's not as accurate as it used to be, but historically, Bitcoin topped whenever the 200-week SMA crossed the prior all-time high. So, like, if you look at 2013, that market cycle top occurred when the 200-week SMA passed the all-time high from the prior cycle. And then if you go and look at the next cycle, that all-time high, you can see that it predicted the next cycle top whenever the 200-week SMA crossed that prior all-time high. Last cycle, it was not as accurate. By the time the 200-week SMA crossed the prior all-time high, Bitcoin's top had already been in for a few weeks. So I don't think you should wait for something like that to happen, but it is relevant to know that the 200-week SMA is at 53K, and the prior cycle top was at 69K, right? So whenever the 200-week SMA does cross 69K, there's a really high chance that the cycle top is already in at that point. Just something for people to keep in mind.
He sees echoes of that currently. Thus, he doesn't expect new all-time highs for the rest of September. Instead, he sees a range-bound or consolidative phase. The real breakout window may begin in October Q4, aligning with historical norms. He also notes that market tops usually land in Q4 of a given cycle, e.g. late 2013, late 2017, late 2021. Even though price can drift higher past that quarterly boundary, Q4 tends to be the central zone of cycle peaks. In that way, he frames a timeline. We may climb further into late Q4, but complacency is dangerous. A reversal could catch latecomers off guard.
Bitcoin right now, I mean, it technically speaking, we are seeing so far it's been a positive month. We also saw 2023 September and 2024 September was also slightly green as well. So basically what happens with Bitcoin historically is that it'll put in a local top sometime in August or early September, and then it'll find a low in September. And sometimes the low will come in early October, but that's the general trend, right? That's the general trend. And so, technically, August was a red month, but also Bitcoin put in a new all-time high in August, right? So it went up for the first half of August. And in September, so far, Bitcoin has been doing quite well. But it also put in a new low. But it went lower than where it had been basically since June, July, right? So it's a very common pattern that Bitcoin has. If you go back and look at basically all prior post-election years, you'll find a low or a high in August or early September, and then a low kind of like late September, early October. Here you see it in 2021. You'll even see it in 2020, a high there in August, and then a low forms in September. This pattern right here actually looks really similar to what we're going through right now. 2017, again, another high in August and a low in September. And then in 2013, you had this high right here in August, and then a wick down in like late September, early October. So it's generally following the blueprint, right? That you get a high in August or early September, and then the market cools off for a few weeks, a consolidation phase. And you can even see how similar this move is to what we had last cycle, where you have this kind of capitulation low, and then kind of you go up and to the right, and then you pop up into that August high, go sideways, and then you go down, and then you just kind of consolidate there just above that 20-week moving average, right? It's basically the same thing playing out. And so to me, this isn't really different than what it's historically happened. We normally find a high in August. We normally find a low in September. So far, it seems to be playing out generally how it normally does. I mean, so far, the consolidation period for Bitcoin in the third quarter will typically last until kind of like the end of September. Even if you go look at all the prior years this cycle, you can see that the breakouts did not happen until October, right? You have October of 2023. And then last year, it was actually late October, early November. This is a common pattern. We've seen this many times, many other times as well. In 2020, the breakout was also in October. So I kind of think you're looking at something very similar, where you have these, you have these breakouts, but the breakouts don't normally happen until October. So I would not expect new all-time highs. At least for the rest of September. Hopefully we can get one as the year goes on. The one thing we have to be aware of for this year is that market cycle tops for Bitcoin, and this kind of gets into the discussion of the whole 4-year cycle. Market cycle tops for Bitcoin tend to occur in the fourth quarter of the year. So you have Q4 of 2013, Q4 of 2017, and then Q4 of 2021, where the actual top occurred. So far this cycle, we've seen Bitcoin continue to go higher even into the following year after Q4. But when you look at the ROI of Bitcoin, say like as measured from the low each cycle, right? Whether you take that low, this low here, right? Each of these lows, if you measure out the ROI from the low for Bitcoin and you just kind of plot them over one another, you can see we're getting close to, potentially the end of the cycle. So I would say that, once we get out into Q4, I don't think investors should be complacent, right? I don't think they should be complacent. I think if we do get a breakout, we need to just be aware that at some point, we likely will put in a cycle top for this cycle, see some downside in 2026, and then just repeat the whole thing again. So, and I think we've talked about this before as well, it does very much appear like we are having, once again, diminishing returns. Every single cycle seems like we drop down a little bit in terms of the returns for Bitcoin. So a lot of times people think that like this cycle is different because the returns haven't been as great for Bitcoin, but it's just an artifact of a very high, a much higher market cap and the need to have exponentially more volume to move the price. Well, no, so this is a common thing that I think people get confused by. I'm not saying it's not going to happen, and this is something that people have misunderstood me for like the last several years. A lot of times when I say that Bitcoin dominance is going to go up, the often response is, oh, so Ben's saying there's never going to be an alt season. The thing about alt season is that timing is really important, right? There's people buying alts 3 years ago that would have told you alt season was around the corner, and then we saw dominance go up for 3.5 years. What I'm saying is that the alt season calls right now are, in my opinion, still premature. And when I say alt season, I don't mean their USD valuations, right? Like alts can go up against the US dollar if Bitcoin's going up. My point is that look at the last 2 alt seasons, all right? You can see them pretty clearly right here, right? So let's just highlight them. so that there's no, so that I'm not being ambiguous in any way. I'm trying to even find the drawing tool on here so I can show you what I'm talking about. But basically, I don't even know where this stuff is anymore.
While you're doing that, I think my broader question is, do alts need to rally a lot more before we see Bitcoin top at this cycle? But I'll let you answer that in your way. Yeah.
Yeah, but look at the last two major alt seasons, right? You had that one right there in 2017 or 2018, 2017, 2018, and then that one right there, right? You see those two? Mm-hmm. But notice that both of them, when they happened, what preceded them, right? What preceded them was Bitcoin dominance dropping and then getting one last rally.
Bitcoin might still surprise us upward, but only within the rules of this new frontier. As always, no one knows the future with certainty. But by framing scenarios, preparing for confluence, and staying adaptive, you give yourself a chance to act wisely when the market shifts. If you found this breakdown helpful, hit like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss future deep dives. Let me know in the comments your take. Do you lean toward 124K top, or do you see room for 180, 200K? And what indicators do you watch for cycle peaks?